Welcome to In the News for June 14th, 2024. I am Brett Burney from appsinlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Brett, I hope you've set aside about 17 hours for today's episode. That's the only way we're going to have a chance of going through all of this. Oh, my goodness.
There was a lot this past Monday, Jeff. I mean, goodness gracious. And okay, let's just jump right in. I feel like, there's so many things that I want to talk about. You did a great job covering iOS 18 that they announced and talked. So many great things in there. We're going to get to that. But I think one of the big headlines, of course, that we've been talking about for many weeks now is artificial intelligence. I'm sorry, Apple intelligence, because just like anything else, pretty much that Apple does. Although I think this is a brilliant move on this. But instead of saying AI as in artificial intelligence, they branded it Apple intelligence. And it was funny because this was a 2-hour presentation on Monday, right, Jeff? And in the first hour, I don't think that anybody mentioned AI anywhere. Like, they didn't actually specify AI until they got to that second hour. And then instead of saying artificial intelligence, it was Apple intelligence. However, in that first hour, I saw all kinds of examples of artificial intelligence. Just an interesting little twist here in how Apple introduced the world to Apple intelligence.
Okay, so there was a reason for that, I believe. In the first hour, so it was the presentation was in two parts. The first hour of it was introducing all the different operating systems, and then the second half of it, which was 45 minutes, was Apple Intelligence. Although there were some things in that first hour that you and I would call AI, Apple referred to them as machine learning, and the distinction is. Apple has been doing AI for years and years and years. So many things that it does on it, memories and photos and so many other features are all done with AI. In that first hour, Apple was showing off features that are going to be just widely available, even if you have older operating systems, older iPhones, older iPads. Yes, it's a form of AI, but it's the form of AI that Apple's been doing for years now, which Apple is calling machine learning.
Yeah.
And the second half of the presentation, and this is the part we're going to talk about now, where Apple talked about Apple Intelligence, one of this distinguishing factors, one of the most simple ones, is that it only works if you have the newest systems. So for an iPhone, for example,
that's convenient.
Not only do you have to, I know people say, because they're trying to sell more devices, and I'm sure they're happy for that to be a side effect, but to have an iPhone with this new Apple Intelligence, it's not even just the iPhone 15 that went on sale last fall. It's got to be the 15 Pro. So you have to literally have not just the latest iPhone, but the top model of the latest iPhone. Now, if you have an iPad, it's a little bit more forgiving. I think it goes back to the earliest M1 processor, which goes back a few years. And the reason for that is because not only the processor oomph, but also because I think of the RAM that they have. You really have to have the latest hardware. So when you think of Apple Intelligence, maybe you're lucky enough to currently have a new model that will be ready for it. But I think for the most part, people are going to start to experience Apple Intelligence when they get their next device for a whole bunch of people, which could, of course, be this fall. But let's talk about Apple Intelligence. It's different from ML because what they've been doing before, because of the way that Apple is treating it, and they're sort of dividing it into 3 tiers. Last week when you and I were speculating, Brett, we thought, a bunch of this stuff's going to be on device, and that's going to be Apple's. That's going to be what makes them different from ChatGPT. It actually is a little bit more sophisticated than that, because it's not just on device versus off device. It's on device versus Apple off device versus not Apple off device. And the reason for that is Apple has realized that to do the processing that's required for Apple Intelligence, and of course you need to have the latest devices, as I just said, to even handle it, they're going to do a whole bunch of stuff on device. But for the stuff that they can't quite do on device, it's just a little too complicated, they're going to do it off device, but it's going to be done off device in a server farms, which is, somewhere in the world that just has a whole bunch of computers that is 100% controlled by Apple. It's going to be a whole bunch of Apple machines. They've been very vague about what the machines are, but I get the sense is it's something like something like an M2 type Mac or something like that, some sort of machine that they have stripped down so that the only thing that the machine does is AI. And that server farm is going to be super fast. It's going to meet all the Apple standards for environmental stuff, like it's renewable energy and everything else. And it's going to be completely locked down, so locked down that they even announced that they're going to open it up for third parties to try to hack into the system. And they're being very open about that, because as Apple goes into the problem with AI, AI is so wonderful, but AI has so many problems that it's notorious for. The hallucinations, making stuff up, which is
Right.
horrible, the safety
Right.
of it, the privacy implications of if I give my information to ChatGPT, does that
Right.
then become of their knowledge? And are they now, if I upload a document, is that document now part of ChatGPT's knowledge base, such that they may actually reveal the contents of that document and the context of answering someone else's questions? So to address that, Apple, from a privacy standpoint and from a security standpoint, they own this cloud stuff. They're keeping it secure. No one from a third party can get in there. And then there's a third layer of AI, which is ChatGPT, which let's put that to the side. We'll get to that later.
Okay.
That's just a structural standpoint of on
Yeah.
device, off
Yeah.
device Apple, and off device something else. The second thing that's important about it is what they're doing with the AI. Apple has they've you would expect that Apple would come at this from a very smart angle, and they have. There's so many different things that AI can do. As a lawyer, one of the things that I do is legal research. And for years and years and years, I've used a service called Westlaw and sometimes an alternative called Lexis. And AI, as applied to legal research, searching for old court opinions, is a really promising thing. But it's a very
Right.
focused version of
Right.
AI. It's a version of AI that just looks at the legal world that someone that's not a lawyer would have zero interest in it. Apple is doing the same thing. They're
Right.
looking at AI and they're saying, what topic can we really make AI appropriate for? And what they have decided smartly is for years, people have referred to, and me too, an iPhone as like their second brain. Because like so much information about me, Jeff, is
Yeah.
in this iPhone. My friends,
Right.
my contacts, my pictures, my memories, my dates, the communications I've had with people in text messages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That if something is truly safe and it knows all the contents of my iPhone or my iPad, it knows a lot about me. And so Apple has
Yeah.
decided that what they want to have is a version of AI, Apple Intelligence, which takes all the information about me and then tries to help me by answering questions. And so if I make comments, referring to family members or referring to upcoming calendar appointments or anything like that, it knows all that stuff because it knows what's on my device, but it's completely happening on device. So it's very, very private. And, my iPhone knows me, but nothing is being shipped up to Apple, with the one
Right.
exception of if it goes to that Apple server farm that we just mentioned. And because that stuff is so private and because it has no persistent memory, if a request from my iPhone goes up there, it does its work, it sends it back to my iPhone, and then it erases it. And it has no, it's not storing anything, whereas people are always worried about
Right.
ChatGPT and its competitors doing that. It's just as if it was on device. It might as well have been on device. Yes, it was temporarily off device, but it was sent right back and nothing was stored. So it's just as private as if it occurred on my own device. And so it gives you the advantage of, if you don't have to worry about privacy, then yeah, let my iPhone have access to all the stuff it already knows and use
Right.
that to give me really sophisticated answers. So that's what I think is going to be. And even though Apple gave a couple examples of things that it might do about asking questions about things coming up in your life and looking at things that you've done in the past. We're going to have to see how
Yeah.
that's used, but I think it's going to be really interesting to do this. And so I like the fact that they're keeping their version of AI focused on like personal intelligence
Yeah.
questions that are
Yeah.
personal to you, and that can be really helpful. There's some other things they've thrown in there too, like for example, they basically have a user's guide in there for devices, so you can actually talk to your iPhone through AI of like, how do I do such and such? And because it knows, basically the entire iPhone user's guide, it can tell you things like that. So that's something that's a little different from personal knowledge, but that
Right.
that is their knowledge. And then so that third area we talked about, which is the things that go in the cloud that's not the Apple stuff. If you ask something
Right.
that's not part of that personal knowledge, a
Right.
perfect example will be something that's world knowledge. I want to know, what are some of the best restaurants that I should visit when I go to Amsterdam, or what are the nicest
Right.
the nicest art galleries in Paris? Things that might just be like a normal like Google search. ChatGPT is pretty good with that stuff because ChatGPT and similar GPT things that are online, Google's got its
Right.
Bard or whatever Google's called, and
Right.
others, they do a good job of sort of scavenging the world knowledge on the web
Of
and giving it
course.
to you. And so if you
Everything.
say,
Right.
how do I make an apple pie? It has read so many different apple pie recipes that it can give you, here are the ingredients you need for an apple
Right.
pie. That's not something that Apple would know. It's not something that's on your iPhone, your personal. And so for those things, Apple is going to give them off right now to ChatGPT. But before it does so, it's going to say, hey, I can't answer this question, but do you want to go to ChatGPT? If you say no, it doesn't do anything. But if you say yes, then Apple passes that information
Right.
on. But even then, there's this extra element of privacy because it's not you going directly to ChatGPT, it's you going through
Correct.
Apple's
Right.
servers. And so it's
Right.
anonymous. So ChatGPT has no idea that the question is coming from Jeff Richardson versus Brett Burney versus, Barack Obama versus any. It has no idea who the question is coming from. And everything's anonymized and private and everything else. And so it's a different interface for these services. And Apple has even speculated in the future they would love it if it's not just ChatGPT. The one that Craig Federighi of Apple speculated on is much like I mentioned before that there's a legal version of AI through either Westlaw or Lexis. I can imagine in the future that somebody like the Mayo Institute, for example, or some medical
Right.
institution might come up with a medical generative AI that could basically serve as a doctor in a way, answer your medical questions.
Sure.
We always joke that people go to things like the Mayo Clinic online and they ask a question
WebMD,
and WebMD. And of course, once you type in one or two symptoms, the next thing you know, you think that you've got some deadly cancer or something. People always jump to the most extreme conclusion. But maybe if you had some medical AI that could more intelligently and more appropriately give you information, that would be another thing that you might ask your iPhone, I have these symptoms, what do I have? The iPhone might say, well, I don't know that question, but I can pass that on to blank MD ChatGPT,
Right.
and it will answer it. So, and then one last thing I'll say, and I'll pause for a second, is that Apple, one of the big problems with AI for all of its promises is things like hallucinations and giving you inappropriate content. And so because Apple, at least for the personal stuff that it's doing, because it has control, it is being very, what Apple calls it is guardrails, and what I call it is just being very conservative. They are making sure, for example, that they're going to, really try to watch it, that it doesn't give you inappropriate content, that if you're asking for, what should I be eating, it's not going to suggest something that would be deadly for you to eat. If you ask it to create a picture, it will create pictures, like it can create pictures within messages if you want to create some silly picture and send it to somebody.
Right.
But the styles are limited. It can make a cartoon, it can make a sketch, but what it can't do is create something that's photorealistic, because that gets into the problem of deep fakes. That if I create something that looks really realistic and the person on the other end might say, oh my goodness, I suppose this is real because this photo looks so real. Other people in the world are happy to do that. Believe me, you can go to, DALL-E or any of those systems. They will absolutely do that. But Apple just doesn't want to play that game. And so they want to make sure that their version of AI is trying to be safer, being more appropriate. They're going to have more control over it. So I think overall, this is, I knew, you and I both speculated that Apple was going to have its own version of AI, but before this week, my simplistic version really focused just on privacy, being on device. And of course they've done that, but they have gone so far beyond. They've thought about privacy, they've thought about security, they've thought about the guardrails, they've thought about what is within their expertise and what's not, what they should be doing, what they should be passing along. It's so well thought out that I just can't. I'm just so impressed. And then to end up where I started, because you need the latest, and greatest devices to run it. The stock market is thrilled right now. Apple stock is at an all-time high.
They went crazy. Right.
Everybody's going to probably want to go out and buy a new iPhone to take advantage of all this technology.
Right.
So, the stock market, and whether that was an intent or just a side effect, I don't know. But regardless, it's certainly true.
Having a few days to think about this, I really do believe and agree with you. I think it was a brilliant move. First of all, it's extremely fortunate that Apple starts with A. So instead of artificial intelligence AI, it's Apple intelligence. I thought that was really a brilliant move. But, at first I felt like, okay, that's so corny. And I could just feel like there was groans all over the world, as soon as Craig Federighi announced it. But I've thought about it since then, and I really like it because it brands this idea. In fact, in the keynote, Craig Federighi talked about Apple Intelligence as personal intelligence system, right, Jeff?
Right.
And, at first I thought, okay, that's just marketing speak. It sounds good. But the more that they started talking about this, and there were 5 pillars that they announced. I can't remember if Tim, I guess Craig Federighi did this. Powerful. They want to make sure it's powerful, that it's intuitive, that it can be useful, which to me, I think is one of the biggest bullet points there. Integrated, which you've done a great job of explaining how it can be already baked into what you're doing. Personal, again, you did a great job of talking about like what's on your phone, since your phone knows so much about you. And then the privacy aspect. You and I have listened to other podcasts and other people speculating today. Some people will say that privacy is at the core of Apple's business model, right? And we have talked about this many, many, many times, and the fact that they have such a focus on that privacy, which is why we were speculating so much about doing some kind of an AI on the phone, which again, I just saw Tim Cook had a short little interview with Marquez Brownlee, right? And they were talking about, and Craig's like, or Tim is like, we have been doing AI for years. And you and I have both said this, Jeff. It's like they have been doing AI. There's so much that's baked into the phone already that we just don't, we almost take it for granted. And, whether or not you use it as much, like with the photo memories, or the fact that it can recognize people's faces. And so it organizes my photos based on my daughter, for example, all that kind of stuff is chock full of AI tools on there. But the fact that they have integrated it even more, and it's so intuitive and on the system. I thought it was just brilliant, the way that they kind of branded this now. Another person that I was listening to said it this way, like, this didn't really have a lot of the whiz bang that you may see from other AI type of presentations that other people have put on there. And some people would say, well, it's like more mundane type of tasks in there. But then I'm like, yes, exactly. Like that's what we use our phones for the vast majority of the time. So some of the examples here, to me, I kind of differentiated this way quickly, Jeff. It's like some of the on-device tools are like the language tools. I wrote an email, I highlighted it, and now I can say on my phone or on my Mac, actually, like change the tone of this email, right? Like I wrote it, I was very mad, or maybe I just wrote a few bullet points, and all of that kind of modification or editing can easily be done right there on the device. Summarizing an email, a smart reply, that kind of a thing like that, to me, I feel like can be done. And I mean, there is a generative component to it, but then it's that next thing that you started discussing, the way that Apple integrated some of these images that can be generated on the fly. I mean, some of these examples, like you would almost like you say, hey, I want a T-Rex riding a skateboard wearing a tutu. I think that was the example they came up with, right? Mm-hmm. And you can generate that image. You can also generate an emoji even based on that image. They call that the GenMojis of that. But there's so much that is capable now. Another thing quickly, I would say that on the device, even being able to search my photos. Just the other day, I was trying to find a photo. I knew I had a picture of me sitting in an easy chair at a lake, taking a picture of my feet. I didn't remember what year that it was. I didn't remember, I knew that it was in Maine, so I tried searching for Maine. It could not find it. And I was very encouraged to watch this. Like, yes, I want some of those AI tools built into my phone that's a little bit more powerful, so I can say, show me a picture of me sitting on a beach, with my feet showing, that kind of a thing. I wish I could have just searched for that. I tried searching for feet. I tried searching for beach. I tried searching for Maine, and I could not find this picture. So some of that stuff, to me, that's the on-device. But then the generative components on there, the fact that I can generate an image or generate an emoji, that's the kind of stuff that I find very fascinating. And I kind of put those into two camps. Quickly, I would just say, you talked about the next level. Like if it can't work on the device, then it's in Apple's cloud, which they call private cloud compute. So I like how they put the word private in private cloud compute. I would like to say and remind everyone, Apple's been doing this for years and years and years. Like they have iCloud server farms in a variety of different places. That's why we used to have she who shall not be named, when we would invoke her or him, it wouldn't work on the device, right? It would have to go up to the iCloud servers and come back down and do whatever component that we needed to do. When you have your password keychain, for example, that's being stored in the iCloud. Like we're already using that, and I like the fact that Apple, like, that's not new. Like, Apple already has much of experience in doing this. And then I like this idea that
you say it's not new. It's new in a certain degree because it's not going to literally be the same computers. I really think that Apple has a special server farm focused on AI.
I agree.
Because, for example, it doesn't have the persistent memory. It's everything stripped down to be as fast and focus on AI. So it's the same idea, and I know that's what you're trying to say. It's not literally the same servers. I think it's going to be the same idea.
Agreed.
It's just done in the Apple way. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, that was about it. I know it's going to be a little bit different in the way they do it, but I'm saying from the infrastructure component, it's not like Apple, has never done this and they're going to get into this market. And that's exactly the same thing that Microsoft does in Google and Rackspace and all of the other big companies. They already have humongous server farms, and Apple is no different. We just don't know as much about it because it is that private aspect. And then just quickly on the ChatGPT, love that they threw that in kind of at the end. To your point, Jeff, I like how you've got the 3 tiers there, but you don't have to have an account on ChatGPT. And I don't know if it's going to, use the more modern version. I like the fact that it asks you before it sends it up. Yes. Oh, fantastic. That's right. They did. It's 4.0. So to me, that's fascinating because I still run into people all the time that have never gone to chatgpt.com, right? They've never used it, but I am confident that if it asks them on their phone, they're like, yeah, sure, go ahead, ChatGPT. What do you come back with me? In other words, this is really going to be, I think, a secure, a trustworthy tunnel into something like OpenAI's tools or, whatever others, because Craig did say there might be others like you commented that would coming down the line. But anyway, just some really exciting stuff on the AI front. Anything else you want to say on that? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say one last thing about what Apple's trying to do with AI is, many of the current AI offerings before this week, I get the sense that really smart people have just sort of said, this is so powerful. Let's just sort of put it out there and see what people use it for, and just sort of see what's, let people throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks. And there's something to be said for that because you don't always know the answer to things beforehand. Apple, on the other hand, appears to be approaching AI a little differently. They appear to be focusing on the Apple Intelligence more on how can it actually be useful to you. And so they're saying things like you might want to use it, you're going to want to use it maybe to summarize emails, you're going to use it maybe if you haven't looked at your messages in a while and there's been a ton of back and forth and you just want to say, what summary. I have this chat group where there's like 30 new messages here, what are they talking about? And it can say, okay, well, in its head, it's going to look at all the stuff and say, okay, well, I see all these messages, they're talking about a back and forth and what time to go to dinner next week. And so it'll just sort of say, all of these messages are talking about what time to go to dinner next week, and it looks like they've decided Wednesday. And therefore, without you having to read every single message, but Apple seems to be more focused on what it can do for you and making that useful, as opposed to just, here's something we're throwing out there and let's just sort of see what happens. And I like that because by focusing on how you can use it, I think it's going to end up being even more useful. And so they've given a bunch of examples, some of which you've talked about, both from writing tools to summarizations to prioritizing things. The search stuff is just truly amazing. And we'll talk about that more today. Now there are places that I do. Well, I mean, I don't know. I could talk about this forever. There are some things that don't appeal to me as much as others, but at least I think that Apple is coming at this the right way. They have, from the beginning, they are doing it structurally, for the most part, the appropriate way, because of the privacy and because of the private stuff and everything like that. And they're very focused on how it can actually be used by you in a practical way, which I think puts them above others. Now, I will say that, to be fair, there are some things about what Apple has done that make some people a little uncomfortable for the same reason that all of these ChatGPT AI type engines make people uncomfortable. A perfect example of being that the way that they get their model in the first place is they have to just read tons and tons of information to use it. And again, this is the same for people. The reason that I, as a person, as a lawyer, I'm a writer. And one of the reasons I am a better writer than some people is because I've been reading my entire life. And so I've read all these books my entire life. I haven't memorized the text of those books, but I've been influenced by the language that I've gotten from those books over the
Absolutely.
years. And the same is true with AI. But AI, on the other hand, not only does it read the entire internet, it sort of preserves the entire internet, and it makes some people
Sure.
uncomfortable. If I'm a publication that sells access to, I'm the New York Times and I sell access to it, the fact that somebody has sort of scraped all this stuff that I put out there without paying me for my copyright, and Apple to a certain degree is as guilty as that as anyone else. They have been scraping the internet, and you can have ethical debates over whether things on the internet are free. It wasn't behind a paywall, but suffice it to say that there have been some complaints lodged this week about how Apple has gotten up and running with AI. They're not unique to Apple. It's the same complaints that people have against Google, against OpenAI, against all of these other companies. I'm just saying that it's at least worth acknowledging that while Apple has done some things so much better than the other companies, there are some other examples in which they haven't. But I guess you could argue that's what you need to do to become a player in the AI industry, and they've done that. But I do hope that going forward, Apple is going to try to do things the right way, to put more guardrails, and as a result, be perhaps even influencing the industry in general in terms of appropriate uses of AI. I feel when we talk about AI today, I feel in many ways it reminds me of like talking about the internet in the late 90s. In the late 90s, Brett, the internet was around, the web was around, it was so new.
Right.
Amazon first came out and we're like, wow, isn't this interesting? You can actually purchase things over the internet, and we started to sort of speculate over what the consequences of that might be, but, never even thinking that, whole shopping malls would go out of business because everybody buys everything over there. And that's just one aspect of it. We're in the same ways AI is going to be a thing for years, for decades. And we're at these early stages now, and decisions that are made today are going to have such huge implications on society. I mean, not to get too, esoteric about it, but I mean, this is important stuff. It's big stuff. I'm glad that Apple is involved. I'm glad that they're taking first steps that, for the most part, seem to be the right way to go. It's fascinating, and later on this year, we'll actually have it in our hands and start to use it. By the way, we should mention before we close this up, this is not going to be available on day one. Apple has said that. I don't know what date iOS 18 comes out. Let's just say it's in mid-September, but Apple has said it's going to be slowly coming out. So it might be later on this year before it comes out. When it does come out, I'm sure it's going to be in a beta version. And I don't think that there's going to be any one date that we're going to say, this is the date of Apple AI. Apple AI is going to be something, or Apple Intelligence is something that it's going to get smarter over months and decades, years and decades. So it's going to be an evolving thing, but it's got to start somewhere. I'm excited though. I mean, this is cool stuff. This is the future.
To your point, I'm going to predict this might be the last time that we separate out the topic of Apple Intelligence. I'm glad that I think Apple did the right thing in being able to, spend some time on it. But from what we see, how this was embedded into the upcoming versions of iOS 18 and iPadOS 18 and everything else, to your point just now, Jeff, I think it's just going to be subsumed. Like, Apple Intelligence is not going to be a separate thing. It's just going to continue to be built into the operating systems. Yeah. To that point, that first hour, so the Apple Intelligence was really focused on the second hour. Apple had to do that, I felt. They had to make sure that people, the world knew, like, yes, we've been doing AI for a long, long time. Now we're going to brand it so that everybody's happy with it. But we're just going to infuse it more and more into the devices that we're already doing. You did a fantastic job of covering a lot of the upcoming features that are going to be built into iOS 18 and iPadOS 18, which actually many of them in here are already incorporated, or they will be incorporating Apple Intelligence, which I just think is cool. In addition to just a wide variety of like really cool additional features that are going to be coming in here. This was a great article that I thought that you did. You ran down like several. I felt like this could have been, 3 times as long, just because there was a lot that they were announcing in this.
What I tried to do in the post earlier this week was not announce all the features, because like you say, Brett, there's so many. And, these features, as Apple rolls them out in the beta versions over the summer, we're going to see all sorts of articles, focusing deep on one issue. And maybe some features will be held back and some will be more advanced. But what I tried to talk about in my post earlier this week was, what are some of the highlights, at least, and this is just personal, this is subjective, good. But the things that jumped out at me. And the one that I started with may have surprised some people, because it's not a sexy new feature. It's just the improved control control center, but I think this is
Yeah.
this is an under the radar feature that maybe I'll be wrong about this, Brett, but I think that the new control center is going to be one of those
No,
things that, at
that's,
least for
I
power
agree.
users, is really
Yeah.
people are going to really like, because it's not just control center. First of all, we know what control center is on the modern iPhones. You swipe down from the top right and you get all those little widget things. And right
Yeah.
now, they are widgets that basically give you controls over things that Apple itself does: the
Right.
volume, the focus
Right.
mode, the Apple calculator, those sorts of things. The new control center, on the other hand, is going to, first of all, be infinitely customizable, including
Yeah.
third parties. So, for example, if I don't use the Apple calculator, I use pCalc. I could have a little pCalc thing in
Sure.
there, which you can't
Yeah.
do now. But you're going to
Exactly.
have multiple pages of these things. You might have one page that's on sort of your general system stuff, one page focused at media, playing and pausing and changing the speakers that your music goes to, one page that may focus with, your home stuff, turning off lights in individual rooms and doing scenes through HomeKit and stuff like that. And you can have all these
Right.
multiple pages. And third-party apps can develop, not just like, if you click this, it'll launch my app, but it could even be more sophisticated. Like, if you click this, it'll do this function in my app. And so
Yeah.
that's going to be cool. Plus, it's not even just in Control Center, because these same little widgets can be used. For years now, we all know that right on the front of our iPhone, there have been these two little buttons. On the left, it's turn on the flashlight,
Yes.
and on the right, it's turn on
Finally.
the camera. And those are good features. I like the
They
flashlight. I like
are.
the camera. But, like, what say I
I
don't
want
use the Apple
more.
camera? What if I use a
Right.
third-party camera app? I can now make it that on the front of my iPhone, that, before I even unlock it, I can make that widget launch a third-party camera app.
Right.
Or what if I don't
Right.
take pictures that much? Or, for that matter, what if I have a new iPhone and my action button already
Yes,
launches the camera?
exactly.
I don't need a button to get me to the camera. Maybe you say, I want my button to get me to, whatever, Microsoft Word, or, if you're a lawyer, my time and billing app, or if
Right.
you're,
Right.
into Instagram, every time I press this button, it goes straight to Instagram. Whatever you want these buttons to be, you can control them. As nice as the flashlight is, do I need to have the flashlight on my, I don't know. I at least, like, when I would think about that.
I
And
want the
so
option to change it.
I want the option to change it. And so, whether it's within the control panel itself or on the front of the iPhone or wherever it's going to be, I just think that this is, no question, a power user feature. But anyone listening to this podcast, sort of by definition, is more interested in the ins and outs and sort of the cool little features than the general public. And I think that this has the potential to be interesting. So,
I
maybe not the
yeah, just
sexiest new feature, but some cool
I
stuff.
know. Actually, to me, it's a little bit of a bigger picture here, because you can have multiple pages now in the control
Right?
center. You can customize a little bit more. Another story you linked to was even the fact that there'll be some updates in the settings app. I think what I like about this is that they're just recognizing, hey, the users want to have a little bit more customization options. A lot of Android users over these last few days have been like, oh my goodness, finally, we've been able to do all this, for years and years. Finally, Apple's waking up to this. But I feel like Apple has a predetermined way, to go about this. People are used to the control center now. To me, I saw some of this and I'm like, oh my goodness, that's almost overwhelming. There's going to be so many options there, to customize. And sometimes kind of like it, the fact that I just have a set little system there. But I don't know. I just, from a bigger picture, looking at this with a control center, with settings, with a couple of other things you mentioned too, the fact that you can customize even your screen and your apps. I really just like, I don't know, I just got really excited about some of the announcements here from a bigger picture aspect of, like, yeah, everybody's familiar with it. Now we're going to give you a little bit more options here in how to customize everything.
Yeah. So let's talk about photos. I think that one of the biggest changes in
Okay.
iOS 18 and iPadOS
Yeah.
18 is going to be the Photos app, because it's got a brand new interface in which
Yes.
you will see not only the grid with, dozens of your photos, but you will also see these larger squares that you can get to for memories and your folders and stuff like that. And it's going to all be in one interface. And when I first saw this, I was a little concerned. In fact, when I wrote about it earlier this week, the thing where I wrote, I had a little screenshot of it, and I said, I'm not quite sure if this design's an improvement or not, although it's certainly different. I've since heard from people throughout the week that have started to play with the beta. And what I'm starting to hear, and I hope this is true because it's promising, is that it's going to take once you take that first minute to get used to it, it actually makes a lot more sense, because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a single interface to get to everything. It's customizable. You can have whatever show up in there you want. If you like memories more, if you like, other organizations more, it's something that
Right.
really does a good job of making it easier to see to get to information that you want. Not just looking at your latest photos, although of course it still has that too, but getting to
Sure.
sections to collections of photos and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It makes the whole universe of your photos and videos more discoverable. And so I'm excited about that. And of course, a
Absolutely.
feature of this, and we're going to talk about this perhaps more later too, but by incorporating Apple Intelligence to this, you gave that example before of trying to find an example of you
Yes.
relaxing when you're in Maine. Because it's got that built in, you'll be able to find photos with so much more ease and power than ever before.
Yes.
And since
Thank
all of
you.
us today have tens of thousands of photos, not all of us, but so many of us have been taking photos
Many
for
of
so
us.
long that you get to the point that you have this photo, you really want to see it, you remember it,
Where is
but
it?
you're like, it's like, oh, where is it? What year was it?
What
Was that in
year?
not 2009? Was it in 2011?
Right.
Was it in San Francisco? Was it in LA? You remember some of it. And so using these tools to be able to service it, that's going to be awesome stuff. Photos is a major change in iOS 18,
Yeah. It's
and
great.
I can't wait. So cool stuff.
And quickly, can I just say on the photos, you saw some of this too. A lot easier now to like take out background items, right? I mean, part of that's the whole Gen AI that you can circle, somebody in the background that photobombed a picture and it will fill that in. Again, many Android users, they've been doing this on Google Photos for a long time, but I gotta say, I like the fact that this kind of stuff is what's going to be on device, right? That's the kind of Gen AI or the AI implementations that are going to be on device. And I like that a little bit better. I trust that a little bit more. Maybe it's the same on the Android phones as well. I don't know quite as much, but I like the fact that it's going to be doing on device.
Yeah, I like the idea that there's going to be a new passwords app, which is in some ways taking the
Yeah,
password features that were there
interesting.
before. I will tell you though, it looks to be a good app. I mean, it surprised me that not only can it be
Uh-huh.
multi-user, which is certainly it has now, but even multi-platform. And when Apple said that they're going to bring this passwords app to Windows, I mean, that's pretty rare that Apple brings, it's not going to be an Android, but I think if you have an iPhone, you don't
I
care about
know.
Android. But if you're someone like me who uses not only a Mac but a PC, if this app was not available on my PC/Windows that I use at work, well, then I would never be able to use it by
Wouldn't be worth
definition.
it. Right.
But the fact
Right.
that it is available, it's going to at least make me think about it. Now, I will probably stick with one password because I'm going to probably
Same.
prefer the more sophisticated features. But I tell you what, this is going to be an attractive option. And for those people that had not yet purchased a password manager for whatever
Correct.
reason, they now have no excuse. It's fantastic. I mean, that's going to be a
Yeah.
cool one.
Good point.
I guess we should talk about math notes. This is cool. This is,
This
I
was
mean,
amazing. Well,
so many
okay. So
levels I love this, but
first you got to talk about the fact, and you did a great job putting aside the jokes for calculator. But I was just listening to another podcast where they were like, this was one of those kind of Easter eggs, right? Craig Fritter, like Apple knew that there's a lot of people saying like, why don't we have a calculator on the iPad? Look it up, folks. It's true. It's been there for many years, and even Apple kind of had like a moment to where like, okay, finally, there's a calculator for the iPad, and everybody saw, it's like it looks just like the one on the iPhone. It's like great, and then they put a little twist in it, Jeff.
they did. It took them 14 years to finally get that calculator built into the iPad. But what they have is new. And the exciting part, of course, is not the calculator itself, which is just a big version of the old calculator, but it's a feature
Right.
that's not just in the calculator app, but it's throughout the operating system called Math Notes. And I sort of think of it as like,
Incredible.
math for the rest of us. So much of the math that I do is first of all pretty simple. I'm just adding up a couple numbers, multiplying, dividing, stuff like that. But so much of the math that I do is also, well, what if I change this?
Right.
If I'm doing, simple additions in one of my legal cases and I'm trying to add up some costs in a case, I'm going to this cost, and what's the total? I can do that in a calculator, but invariably the first thing I do after I add them up is I then say, okay, well, what if I change that first cost to this? Or what if I divide
Yeah.
this in terms of 4, in
All
terms of 3?
clear.
And those sorts of things that I'm making little changes. This is what Math Notes is made for. Now, let me first say that the way that they've done this is so fun because on an iPad, if you're using the stylus, you can just write things like you can write a problem,
Yes.
2 plus 2 equals, and it will actually put in the answer for you. But even better than that, you can so easily make variables. Like, for example, I can say that, I'm trying to figure out the cost of this home project. I might say kitchen equals, this much money, and bedroom renovation equals this much money, and the landscaping equals this. And then I can just say, bedroom plus landscaping, and then it will automatically add that stuff up. And that way, if I go back and I change and say, okay, well, that kitchen cost is a little high. What if I changed it from, $10,000
Right.
to $8,000? And then what if I increase the landscaping? And then it will make the changes appropriately throughout because it's all dynamic and it's just very simple. It's right in front of you. It's a great use of the pencil. I just think it's amazing.
Yeah.
You don't have to use the pencil. You can also just use,
Yeah, you said
typing,
that here.
and even on your
Yeah.
iPhone, you have seen that picture there. You can just use
Yeah.
text. But I think in terms of the way that it looks from a format standpoint, it looks beautiful and incredibly intuitive and useful on an iPad. That may be the best implementation of Math Notes. But so this is really cool stuff, and it can be sophisticated. I mean, you can use things like sine and cosine and variables and exponents and things that are far beyond the math that I remember from high school. If you want to, it's there. And for students, this might be the ultimate cheating device when you're doing your homework for school.
Well,
No question about that. But well, let's not say cheating, perhaps learning, because you would hope that you would understand it and then learn it. But it's the ultimate for that. But for those of us adults that are just doing important math throughout our day, but really not that complicated, this is going to be perfect and so much more powerful than a calculator. Now, let me just say, you always talk about Sherlocking and things that are out there before. There has been an app out there for years and years and years called
there has.
Solver, which does some of these same
Yes.
things. And this is the same idea. But of course, when Apple does it, not only is it done very elegantly, but it's accessible throughout the operating system, not just in a particular app. And so, again, they may not have been the first to come some of these ideas, but they have done it in an incredibly powerful way, used throughout the system. I think this one's going to be super useful.
And just to be clear, like it's what I read, because if you're listening, you may not have caught this because you can see this if you're watching the YouTube video, but it was amazing because there was the lady on the announcement that was holding an iPad. She had an Apple Pencil and she started writing out the calculations. And as she was writing, the iPad would then calculate it. So you can see in this picture here, the white handwriting is what she's writing, and then the orange numbers, which the numbers appear similar to her handwriting in this calculator. I mean, there's a few layers going on here that it's just like you're wrapping your head around, in the sense that, like, how accessible that this math can be. And she can scratch out a number, to your point. And there was another one where it was some kind of they were calculating the trajectory of a ping pong ball or something, right, Jeff? It was like and she was like moving the number with a pencil. I mean, there was multiple layers here that I think it's really going to take some time for everybody to kind of play around with it enough to see. But anyway, that was real good. So that was Math Notes, man. Oh my goodness, what is it? We're on 3 now of 583.
There's a million to pick out. I mean, I guess I'll quickly mention Mail, because Mail is something that a lot of us use a lot. That Apple has, and they have changed Mail in a million different ways. They have broken it up so that they can automatically sort emails. So, for example, instead of your inbox being cluttered by all the emails you get throughout a day, it might take all of the, not necessarily spam, but like things that might not be spam, but it might be from a commercial institution you're trying to sell you something. You're not trying to get business. So it's going to stick that in one folder. And if it's got things like your receipts from your airline and stuff like that, it's going to sort things in different folders so that your inbox can be just the stuff that you are most interested in, and then you have those alternative folders that you can go to and you can see stuff. So that's nice. It can group things together. I mean, the airline example is, you can just say, Delta, and it will take all of the emails from Delta and it will put them together in a nice interface with a nice logo at top.
Right.
And it will put it in an organized way to make it easier for you to get at the information that you want. Of course, they're going to have some AI features built into Mail that's going to help you find stuff.
Right.
It's just there's features built into Mail that will help you to draft messages. I mean, this gets in more into the pure language type AI type things that if you write something and you want it to try to change the style of it, you can do that. Right. If you wanted to draft something for you. Again, I have mixed emotions about how much I'm going to want Mail to draft for me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, much like autocomplete, we're always amazed that if you're using your thumbs to type in a message, autocomplete on the iPhone has gotten good enough that it often does predict the next word you want to do, right?
Right.
So we often find that I don't have to type that next word. I can just tap the word significant right here, because that's what I was going to say next anyway. And that's instead of me typing all those different letters. Bringing that same type of analysis to Mail, where it can start to type ahead and help you get things done more quickly. It's useful. This predictive texting and this is a big unknown to me. Like I'm gonna have to see this to see how useful it is. But in my brain, it at least has the potential to be incredibly useful. Look, I'm going to be cautious. Let's stay on the sideline and watch. But this could be something that a year from now we're all saying, "Oh my goodness, it's so much easier now that mail has been improved."
Okay. Yeah. Another thing quickly, I want to hear your thoughts because I thought this to me is going to be some of the bigger things is messages and iMessages. Man, they announced a few
so
things
many changes
coming in this. But even like from that predictive aspect, and being able to reply to different messages, I think my wife was so thrilled that she could schedule a text message to be sent later.
That's
Again,
a nice
I know
one,
this has been around and some others, but even just little tiny things like that. The fact that I could do rich text. I love the fact that I could bold some text and
Underline,
italicize some
bold.
text. Some really cool stuff, I think, coming into the Messages app.
Yeah, tapbacks as well. Tapback is a feature that I've used a lot more than I thought I would, because so many times someone sends you a message and you're like, that's, you want to acknowledge that you appreciated, their funny joke, but you're not going to type a whole response. And so the idea that you can currently hold back and just have it say ha ha or a thumbs up or a heart, it's really nice. But sometimes those, 6 reactions that are built in right now, that may not encompass the entire universe of the expression that you want to express.
I want more.
And so now you'll be able to, first of all, those 6 look better because they're in color. And second of all, you can have any emoji. And so if the appropriate emoji response is like somebody going, that little, I don't know emoji, you can have that as a tap back or the shoulder shrug, whatever the appropriate thing is. And I think that tapbacks is already something that I enjoy using, and having the entire emoji library available to do tapbacks, that's going to be really cool.
One other thing, I'm assuming this, see if you've heard this. In order for all of this to work, though, your recipient also has to have an iPhone. Would that be correct? I mean, a lot of this to me, I feel like it's on the messages layer. Maybe some of it would come in some other aspects, but what do you think? Have you heard anything on that?
It depends. I mean, tapbacks is already, only iPhone. And I guess I'm lucky that pretty much everybody in my life has an iPhone, Now, I will say that Apple is adding support for this thing called RCS, which is it really only is, it doesn't matter for your iPhone people, but for the Android people that you communicate with, if they also support RCS, it allows more sophisticated features. And it's things like as simple as, on the iPhone, the ... while you can see that somebody else is typing something and you know that something's coming. I think that's part of RCS, whereas in the current world, if you're communicating via SMS with someone on Android, you don't know that they're still typing something. There's a million other. So RCS is going to bring SMS communications, the green bubble communications, a little bit closer to Apple communications. But for most of these, fun, whiz bang features, it'll probably be for people communicating with iPhones. Having said that, I mean, a lot of it will work. Images will work, other things will work.
Oh, there's so many more things in here, Jeff. Okay, but we're probably going to move on. But just a few things, like you even mentioned phone call transcripts. I mean, that's going to be really useful, cool. Yeah. I think that's going to be extremely helpful because some of that's already there, like with, voicemail and stuff like this. But this is actually a phone call. Accept or reject calls with your head. I don't know how that's going to work out. It's, you have to have your AirPods, I believe, right? In order for your AirPods, and it works with that.
Can I mention one that's so silly that I it's so silly and it's so wonderful. And this is the silly thing that apparently if you push the button on the side of your iPhone, the picture on the other side of the bezel, it'll sort of like move in a little bit. And it's like, it's as if you're actually squeezing the button and you're seeing on your screen. And of course it's fake, but it's just there you go. This picture that you're showing now sort of shows it in action. It's like, who thought of that? That's just a silly but wonderful feature. Whoever I give claps to whoever. It's a tiny thing that's inconsequential, and yes, it's awesome. I love it. So
it's just to me, it's just a little bit of a polish, Jeff. It's just a little bit of a polish. Another thing that you quickly linked to also was, I had no idea, nobody talked about this, but now the iPhone flashlight in iOS 18, you can change the beam thickness of the light. I don't even know how they would do that necessarily. I didn't even know that was a possibility. I'm loving that. I know. So. You can't do it. I mean, I figured you have to do it with hardware because, I've got flashlights where you twist the top, right? And the beam, it goes, smaller. So anyway, just really, there's going to be, I think, so many tiny little things like this, Jeff, that are just going to thrill and delight us. And I think that's what Apple does. They put these little tiny things in that are just delightful as they go through. Okay, whew. There's so much more in iOS 18 and iPadOS 18, but those I think are very good from like the highlights, the main things people are going to be talking about. Okay, let's do a quick rundown of some of the other things. How about the Apple Watch? I thought this was pretty cool. My big takeaways from the Apple Watch announcements were pretty much all focused on health aspects. What do they call this? The totality load? No, what are the training load? Which I feel like is kind of a funny thing, but just really some neat ways to continue to track, delightful ways to track your general fitness, your activity throughout the day.
Yeah. And it's not just throughout the day. I mean, let me start with the day with throughout the day. One of the features that I have wanted for a very, very long time is the ability to pause your statistics on
Yes.
streaks. That's something that there was a time period years ago that I used to try to get my all of my circles every single day. And then every once in a while, something would come up that, I just can't do it today because
You
I'm
can't do it.
traveling or, for some reason
Yes.
possible. And I
Yes.
used to try to find ways to fake around it because I knew that, I know it's just a silly psychological game with myself,
You
but the
want that
fact that I
streak.
had the fact that my streak still exists would be the thing at the end of the day that would encourage me to work out that otherwise I
Right.
wouldn't have the encouragement because I have the streak. And so, for years I've said, wouldn't it be great if they could just add it? Now, for me personally, I had a surgery about a year ago that it was, I couldn't work out. And so since then it's been trying to get back on track again. But when I do get back on track, I like the idea that it'll be a more gentle streak. Yes, it's a streak, but if I need to take a pause for a day, that's fine. And again, who cares? It's my own person. I mean, it's not hurting anybody else in
Right.
the world. If I
But it's
say,
nice.
give me Friday off for goodness sakes, I'll start up again on Saturday. So that's a silly thing. Another one that
A
was
rest
interesting
day. A rest
is a
day.
rest
My
day. Give
wife
me
is
a rest
excited
day.
about this. She calls it like a Sabbath. We need to have a Sabbath day. For those people that need a day that they're not working out, it's just tell the watch, like, listen, I'm taking off today. Just don't bug me about it. Anyway,
Exactly.
I'm happy about that one too.
So that's during the day. Another interesting one is during the night. As you mentioned, Brett, it's so much about health. And Apple has been, for years, they've had all these smart people, doctors, et cetera, that have said, what information can we get from the data that an Apple Watch gives you? And apparently that
Right.
they have decided that this thing called the Vitals feature, that if you wear your Apple Watch overnight, there's a number of things that it can measure during your sleep, such as your heart
Oh,
rate,
yes.
your respiratory rate, your wrist temperature
Oxygen
on the
level.
newest Apple
Yep.
Watches, oxygen level, sleep duration. And apparently, according to people that know a lot more about health than I do, if you put all of that together, it actually can give you some interesting information about how you're doing. And so this feature, if you wear your watch at night, which again, not many people do, you got to make sure you charge a little bit during the day since you're not charging
Right.
overnight. But it will, if you do this, and I think you have to do it for like about a month, 28 days in a row. But then once you start to give it that information, it can start to give you some feedback. And Apple is always walking that line between they want to be giving you information about your health, but they also don't want to be crossing the line into what the FDA or the whatever agencies are saying that it becomes a health device, and so it's subject to all these requirements. So they're trying to get as close as possible to giving you actionable, interesting, and useful health information without crossing over the line into becoming I'm a doctor. But they get closer and closer to that line every day. And this is another example of it. And again, I don't know personally, how useful this is, but the fact that Apple, through it, it's the smart people that they work with, have said that this is going to be interesting. It'll be another metric that will, perhaps get something out of.
Absolutely.
There's also some more improvements to the Smart Stack. I'm just barely getting used to the feature that in the current watch, if I'm looking at my watch face and I push up, then it brings up that little stack of things. It was a whole new interface. It took me a long time to get into, but I'm starting to get into it now. And now they're going to be improving them. So instead of just like right now, it's static information. What's now playing, what's the weather, do I have any medications to take? They're going to be able to be more interactive in the future, which sounds good. They're going to even be smarter. I mean, they gave an example of if rain's about to start, something that you're showing that on your screen right now, it can show, because we think rain's about to start outside, here's when it's likely to start, here's when it's likely to stop. Normally it wouldn't show that, but during the one period of the day when it's about to rain, well, that's when that would be useful. So let's go ahead and add that. So, making that stack even more useful, of course, is a great idea, and it will help people like me get even more useful to it and appreciative and stuff like that.
Agreed.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else that jumped out at me. Of course, there's new workout types, changes to
Yeah.
that. Um,
The double tap gesture, which I guess you only have to have. That's the one that you have to have like a certain model of the watch in order to do
mhm.
that. But you could tap. You have the ability to tap with your finger and thumb together. But now you can do a double tap. I thought
Mhm.
that was really interesting on there. Okay,
They
I
say
know
that they
there's a
have a
little
new
bit
feature
more.
that's,
Yeah,
yeah, I'll just mention real quick.
yeah,
If you like to have a photo on your watched face, the new version is going
yeah.
to do an even better job of picking out really good photos that look good on the watch and frame them appropriately and stuff. So anyway, go ahead.
Couple of announcements for the Vision OS 2. The Vision, Apple Vision, has not even been out a year, Jeff. Not even a year. And now we're on Vision OS 2. What were a couple of things here that got you excited? This is an article from Jason Snell that you linked to.
Yeah, so some of them make sense. It's not until something is actually out there in the wild that you really start to see, oh, does that feature make sense or should
Yeah.
it be changed? And a good example of it is when you're using the Vision Pro, you often want to get to the control center. We just talked about how on the iPhone you swipe down
Mm-hmm.
from the top right. And so
Right?
given that, with that idea of top, in the current Vision Pro, if you want to get to your control center, you look up. And if you look up, you see this tiny little dot at the very top. And then if you pinch your fingers together, and sometimes it's hard to see that dot, then it will sort of come down and it can do things like
Oh, okay.
volume control and all the sorts of things that you might want to control in Control Center, connecting Bluetooth headphones and stuff. But Apple realized that it's actually it sounds like it makes sense, but it's actually a little obnoxious to have to look all the way up like that. And so they came up with the better idea of just putting your hand out flat in front of you. And when you put your hand in that position, a little control panel will show up right next to it, and then you can control it with your hands.
Oh,
And if you
okay.
flip your hand over so that your palm is facing up, it can do some other controls. And so these are the sorts of examples of things that it's not that the initial implementation was bad. It's just that now that people have tried it for a while, they could say, maybe we can do a better way. And they wouldn't have even
Right,
known
right.
if the first one had not been put out in the wild that there's better ways to do it. So I think that's a cool thing. One of the interesting GWiz features is I often talk on the Vision Pro that anything that's in 3D spatial, those things are what makes the Vision Pro so special. And
Right,
so
right.
watching a movie on a Vision Pro, pretty cool because it's a really big screen. Watching a 3D movie or an immersive movie, that's where it's something really
Even
special.
better.
And so I have very, very few photos on my Vision Pro that are in 3D. And I only have them because I've taken them with my iPhone where it uses, the two cameras like this to sort of make a 3D picture.
Right.
So I have very few of them, and they're only from the last, gosh, not even a full year, 6 months of pictures that I have like this. Apple is going to take this feature that they can analyze any photo in your photo library, and they can
That
sort of
is
make a
amazing.
fake 3D effect. And I've seen this before, like for years now on Facebook. I have some friends that use this filter on Facebook that as you scroll up and down your Facebook timeline,
Uh-huh.
it sort of makes the
Yeah.
picture look 3D. So I've
Right. I
seen
know what
this
you're
type
talking
of
about.
technology
Yeah.
before, but that's a 3D picture on a 2D face of an iPhone. This is going to be a 3D picture in a 3D world of the Vision Pro.
Wow.
And again, I haven't tried it yet. But for the developers that have started to use the betas this week, they have said things like, I have gone back to my wedding photos from 20 years
Right.
ago. And when you go to a photo, you have to say, turn on this spatial feature. It takes about 15 seconds to analyze it. So it's not like it's going to do your whole library at once now, at least. But if you take that photo that you're very familiar with and you turn on the effect, now the photo sort of comes to life in a way that just is, according to the people I've read online, they say, wow, this is really a tearjerker. It gives this new life to the picture. So, recognizing the fact that the Vision Pro is really best when you have things in that sort of 3D effect, being able to bring that to old pictures is cool. And then there's
It
a whole
looked
bunch of,
amazing. Yeah, it looked amazing when they showed it on the video, Jeff. And then I
yeah.
reminded myself that's only a 2D representation. I can't wait for you to see something on your Vision Pro with with a 3D like this spatial video. Even Jason Snell here, the link to, he goes, I've yet to see a photo that failed to become more interesting after it is converted. And I don't think that they convert the original one, but in other words, it says it takes about 15 seconds to spatialize that photo.
Mhm.
But apparently he was blown away. Like he thought it was just really cool. So I'm excited to see what that's going to look like.
Yeah. And then other little just, life improvements that they have throughout it. The things that are, one that I'll mention is keyboards. Right now, if I
Yeah.
tend to use my Vision Pro where I actually have it in an augmented reality world where I can actually see my outside world. So that way, if my wife or my kids walk in the room, I can see them. But every once in a while, you want to put yourself in this completely immersive mode where you pretend like you're on the moon or you're on the top of a mountain or something like that. And when you do that, you can actually still see your hands, but you can't see other things that you're touching. So that if I pick up my
Oh.
AirPods Pro case, I will see my hand, but I actually won't see the case.
What's
Instead, I'll
the
see,
case?
the mountain or whatever. But
Right.
one of the reasons that that's a problem is that if you're using a keyboard to try to type something, and so if you're in this immersive environment, I mean, I don't have to look at the keys to type because I know how to touch type, but sometimes it's sort of useful to sort of see
Sure.
the
Yeah. You
keys.
want to look
And
down.
so Apple is using AI to, at least if you use the Apple Magic Keyboard, which is actually what I use, or if you're using the keyboard that's on your Apple laptop computer, it will actually show the keyboard in the immersive environment. Again, this is the sort of thing, it's a technical
Wow.
detail that I can understand how people didn't think about this at first. And yet once they start to use the Vision Pro, they're like, oh, you know what? We sort of forgot about that, or we didn't get to
Yeah.
that yet, and we
Yeah.
need to fix that. And this is what I expect to see for the next 3 years, 5 years. Apple is going to slowly figure out in this whole brand new platform what makes it more sense, what makes it more usable. And this is great stuff because that means that 5 years from
Yeah.
now, when the
Yeah.
cost comes down and more people are using whatever the next generation of Vision Pro is called, they will have worked out all the kinks. And so that's what we're doing right now, is working out all the kinks.
One last thing that I thought was so amazing is right now you can use your Vision Pro with a Mac that's in front of you. And one of the things that they show, Jeff, is that you can see in your Vision Pro your Mac desktop. But then they showed you could expand the Mac desktop. And that just blew my mind. I'm like, that I might have to get that would make me want to get a Vision Pro, because the fact that I can have my desktop, I mean, I'm already using 3 monitors. And it's like, because I want more screen real estate. The fact that I can just like blow that up and just massively expand my desktop screen is pretty cool. I'm excited about that.
There's that old phrase that Henry Ford apparently is alleged to have said that, I don't ask people what they want, because if I asked people what they want in the early 1900s, they would have said faster horses, when in reality they wanted a
Right.
car. And the
Yeah.
same idea, before this week,
Yeah.
people were saying, I wish I could have multiple monitors in the Vision Pro so that I have a left monitor and a right monitor.
Yeah.
What they didn't realize is what they really
Why?
wanted was not two monitors, but a
Oh, that's
single
good.
long monitor that
Huge.
stretches from left to right, which is
Yeah.
technically the same number of pixels as 2 or 2.5 monitors, but it's just one. I mean, why even have the
I'm all
break
for
between
it.
monitor?
Yeah.
And this is an
Yeah.
example of, if you really
Exactly.
think through it, this is a better way to do it, and very, very cool.
I am so on board. Okay, how about tvOS, the Apple TV? A couple of things here. The Insight, which
That's the big one.
I don't know. To me, I thought that was really interesting.
I'm one of these people that I'm often, and maybe this is just me getting older, I don't know. My wife and I are constantly watching a show, and then we'll pause it and we'll say, wait a minute, why do I recognize that actor? And then we'll think
What
about it
else
and
was
we're like,
he in?
oh, they were in such and such, or they were the bad guy in this show. And sometimes we're smart enough to think of that ourselves. Oftentimes we will be checking. I used to
You're
check an app
looking it
called
up.
IMDb. Right now, lately,
Yeah.
I've been using an app called Call Sheet. But you look up the name, you're like, oh, why do I know them? Yeah, that's right, who they are. So Amazon, I don't actually watch Amazon Prime Video that often, but when I do, one of the things I like about it is that whenever you pause, it will have this
That's
feature
right.
called X-ray, where it actually
X-ray.
says,
Yeah.
here are the
Yeah.
actors that are currently on screen. Here's their names, everything. And so Apple has sort of done their
Right.
version of it, which is a little bit more than X-ray currently gives you, that you'll be able to see, the name of the actor, the name of the character they're playing. So if you can't remember, especially in like these Game of Thrones type shows, their names are so bizarre, Middle Earthian type, who is this? Oh yeah, this is
You're
Gogasha
right.
Portabredi, oh yeah, that's who that is. So you can see the name of the actor, see the name of the character, get a little bio on who they are. You
Right.
can even see like
Right.
the soundtrack, like it's almost like a Shazam type thing. What music's playing in the background. And what's cool is,
That's
of course,
cool.
that can
Yeah.
be on your TV, like X-Ray is, but because Apple has this app on the iPhone called Remote, which people will sometimes use in place of the hardware
Sure.
remote, they'll
I
use
do.
the
Yeah.
iPhone app. you'll be able to see that on the iPhone. And so that's what I think would be cool is like my wife and I are watching a TV
Yeah.
show and I don't want to interrupt the show, but can just pull up my iPhone, go to the remote app.
Then it's
I don't
there.
even need to say, I mean,
Nice.
because if you're saying
Well
what
done.
actor is on the screen, I'd have to, look up the series, try to figure out who it is. I don't have to do any of that stuff. I could just look at my phone and it'll say that person you're looking at right there. Here's their name. Here's why you know them. And I'm like, oh yeah. So I actually think this is going to be a really cool feature that I'm going to be using quite a bit. So that's the big one I'm looking for in tvOS. There's some other little improvements too, but that's the one that jumped out at me the most.
That's the big one. Okay, iPhone, iPad, we did those. Apple Watch, Vision Pro, the Apple TV. How about CarPlay? A couple of things. This was a great article you linked to on MacRumors. Joe Rossignol talk about the 5 new features in CarPlay. I don't know that I'm terribly excited about these, but I am always happy to see some improvements to CarPlay.
Yeah, I remember it was pretty recent. Apple added that if somebody calls me, not only do I see their name, but I also see their picture on my CarPlay screen. And now it looks like they are also using pictures in the Messages app. So, I mean, as you're driving,
Yes.
you want to obviously keep your eyes on the road. And so glanceability is pretty important. And, if I glance right now and I see, John on my screen, that's fine, but I might switch away. Did I read that correctly? Who is that?
Right.
Which John is it? Whereas if it's a picture too, a picture is 1,000 words, blah, blah, blah. I think that's a good idea that I can more easily glance, immediately see who the message is from, and then know who you're communicating with. That's a nice little improvement. The other things that they have coming out with are just more on-screen alerts for things and different modes, the silent mode settings and stuff. I mean, it looks like it's mostly incremental improvements. Of course, Apple has their huge improvements that we've talked about behind the scenes. And we've been talking about this for a few months now of integration with the car capabilities and stuff. But so much of that stuff is dependent upon manufacturers, and some manufacturers don't want to do it and some do. So like there's big CarPlay improvements behind the scenes, but you may have to wait for your next car to take advantage of those. And even then it's only if the car manufacturer uses it. But the what interests me are the ones like we just described, things that everybody's going to have in CarPlay, and that sort of stuff's coming. So it's nice to see that CarPlay continues to roll on forward.
Speaking of cars, how about a brief "Where You At" segment?
Where you at?
This was pretty incredible. This was a story from your backyard, apparently, Jeff. I'm going to go turn off my ad blocker here.
You have to do continue without whatever on that screen. But so the story is that this was in the New Orleans area. It just happens to be our local CBS affiliate, WWL. But a guy had his car stolen. We've had so many stories we've talked about recently that people hide an air tag in their car so that if it's stolen, they can track it. I have that in my cars. I have air tags in my cars. But this gentleman, it never even occurred to me this is a possibility. Apparently, he left his AirPods in his car. And so after his car was stolen, he was able to track the car because he looked on his iPhone at the location of where his AirPods are located. And as I think about that, I'm pretty I know the AirPods Pro have that feature. I don't think that the regular AirPods do, and somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, but I know for an AirPods Pro, what that's one of their selling features is you pay a little bit more, but you can actually use Find My with it. And so I just thought that was really interesting that he was able to find his stolen vehicle because his AirPods were in it. Very, very interesting. Now, this particular story then leads to the caution we always have that if somebody steals your car, do not confront them on your own. Please get the cops involved to be safe. Because when this guy goes to confront them, somebody had a gun and tried to shoot him, and apparently they grazed him. So it's not. I mean, in fact, I don't even know from the story if he got his car back.
Don't take the
hopefully
chance.
He did.
Yeah.
But the thing is, so use this information wisely. Please get the police involved. But even if you don't have an AirTag in your car, apparently you can use AirPods to track a car. That was one I had not thought about before.
That's amazing. Yeah. Good on the AirPods. Which I just am realizing how much during the day that I use my AirPods, Jeff. Like it's almost constant with me with my phone, because the fact that I love the transparency, and then I have the adaptive sound. Like I know that I can walk around the house, and if somebody like needs to talk to me, that the adaptive sound will adjust. Anyway, I just really like that, I have to say. Cool. But now I'm glad that I could justify the cost of my AirPods, because it will also help me track down my stolen car potentially. All right, in the know. I thought quickly we could just run down some of our favorite announcements, even though obviously we've covered some of them already. Here's my quick list. The photo searching. I already mentioned that, cool. Jeff. I am so excited. And again, it's not like that's brand new. We could always search our photos. The fact that I can search photos now using natural language. That's the bigger thing on theirs, right? That instead of just saying, hey, I want a picture of me with feet. I mean, that alone is pretty amazing. But if I can say feet on a beach or something, where was that photo that I took when we were, so-and-so? And the fact that there's already so much information about the photos already on the phone, the location, the time of day, all that kind of stuff. I thought that's pretty good. There was another one. We didn't talk too much about the new updates to Mac OS, which is going to be named Sequoia. Anyway, that they didn't spend a lot of time on it in the announcements, but one of the things here, I don't know if they're going to actually show this. I got to see how this is going to go. It's called iPhone mirroring. Now, there's not a lot that I would need to see my iPhone screen on actual Mac, but as part of the continuity now, I can connect my iPhone to my Mac, which it's already connected anyway, and I can see the entire screen. Even more importantly, Jeff, I can interact with my iPhone on my Mac. Now, unless you kind of see this happening, it's a little mind-blowing, but even better I think for folks like us, Jeff, I'm assuming I could do the same with my iPad, although they only show the iPhone on this. But sometimes I want to move or copy files to my iPhone as opposed to going through like Dropbox. And I can drag and drop on there now, which is pretty incredible. Really cool. The other thing I liked was we talked about the emoji tap backs. I think that's going to be, I predict that's going to be the biggest thing that people are going to like within iOS 18. The fact that you can customize an emoji, you can create your own emoji. And we only barely addressed even the fact that you can customize your home screen, which I don't know. That's going to be a little bit interesting how people are going to be. If I was an app developer, I don't know that I want people to have the ability to change the colors of my app icon, that kind of a thing. But anyway, the emoji tapbacks is another one that I think is going to be a pretty big deal. We already talked about the rest day on the Apple Watch. Again, I think that's brilliant. They should have been doing that from early on. Like there are going to be some days you just can't get the workout in. And then one other thing quickly that I think we barely touched upon this with the Messages app. My last one here, Jeff, is they talked about the fact that Messages now will work through satellite. So I don't feel like that they went too deep into this. We already have this capability when you do not have cellular access and you can send messages through satellite. And when I started seeing that was several months ago. We were all pretty excited when they came out with this. You have to have a certain model of phone in order for that to work. But I predict, I think this is another direction that Apple is going to be going, because what if you could send and receive text messages without having to rely on your cellular carrier? I believe that one day Apple is going to go this route. I don't know if Apple's going to start launching satellites, although I have predicted that in the past. But the fact that they could do an in-run, maybe not for everything on the data, but certainly for text messages, I feel like that certainly could be something that Apple is going. Again, they didn't go into a whole lot of detail on this, but I predict that that's going to be a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I have questions. I mean, before this week,
right,
what you could do is if you were in the middle of nowhere with no cell phone coverage, you could access emergency services and say, I'm lost, whatever. What the new thing is that you can send a message to somebody that will then send through the satellite to go to the other person. Yes. So I can, I've arrived at the campsite and, whatever. And in fact, could you, on the screen that you're showing right there, can you bring up that information again? Because one thing that was unclear to me is whether it's sending and receiving. And it says when texting people on iMessage, you'll also be able to use key features like sending and receiving messages. Okay, so this
emoji and tap backs.
Until literally just now, I did not actually realize it went both ways. So apparently it's not just that I can send you a message, but I can receive. And that second part's important because the only way this works is if you go through the trouble of holding your iPhone in a special way that it communicates with the satellite. So I won't necessarily know that you, Brett, have sent me a message when I'm sitting here in the middle of nowhere at my campsite. I guess I would just have to sort of hold my phone up and wait for the satellite and just see if you happen to send me something. So I have questions about how it works. Also, it's amazing to me that I have not yet seen Apple say that they're charging for this feature because, if you have if you have like a Garmin satellite, texting device, then you're absolutely being charged for the feature. Maybe Apple's not going to charge for it. I don't know. So, but however, those are just the details of it. And maybe the devil's in the details, but it's a very cool technology. And I love the idea that if you've got your iPhone with you, wherever you are, you're safe. You get in a crash, it's going to call 911. I'm in the woods, I can't find anybody. I can contact my friends or I contact 911 if it's necessary. So I think that's a really cool announcement. And I was glad to see Apple do it. As for my favorite announcements today, I think we've talked about most of them. Much like you, the photo searching is going to be
Okay.
fantastic. The control center,
Yeah.
we've talked about that. I'm looking forward to that. Math notes seems like it's math made for me, math made for Jeff. It's the very types of math things that I want to do on
That's what
my
they should
iPad.
call it.
Can't wait to do them. And the last thing I'll say is I love the fact, and again, I always feel like I have to use the caveat. I know nobody has a Vision Pro but me. They're so expensive. So many people have so few people have them right now. It's all early days, but it's just fun to see Apple developing this product and adding more spatial things like the spatial photos and stuff like that. It's fun. I just saw a day or two ago that Apple is adding this new thing that if you are in a spatial persona mode where I'm talking to somebody else, but instead of it being like a FaceTime thing where you're within a screen, it's just your friend's image is over there as if they're sitting on your couch talking to you.
Right.
I'm over here, they're over there, and it really spatial persona is very cool. It really does make it seem more like the person's in the same room as you. And now one of the features they've added is that if the two of you, high five or touch fingers together or do a fist bump, you apparently feel some haptic feedback or something like that, or some sound that
Ooh,
makes
okay.
it if you're in the same room. That little feature is a gimmick, but it sounds pretty fun. But what excites me about it, it's not just that particular feature. It's the idea that these are the sorts of things that they're starting to explore. And as they build up 1, 2, 10, 20 of those little bitty features, it's going to make the whole idea of spatial persona that I will
Yeah.
be able to have conversations with people, just as if they're really in the room. And it's the same way, just the other day I saw my wife and my sister-in-law were having a FaceTime conversation, and I was thinking, years ago that would have to be a phone conversation,
Oh,
but
so huge, right?
thanks to FaceTime technology, they could see each other, they could show things off.
So easy.
Video is it's completely changed it, and we're going to get to a world where this spatial personas through communications, it's going to become the norm. It's going to
Yeah,
be like
exactly.
having this hologram communication with your loved ones, and not just when you're talking with each other, but even as you're sharing things together.
Right, right.
There was let me end with this. There was an event this week in Cupertino, after WWDC on Tuesday night. One of the people that I often link to, John Gruber of the website Daring Fireball, he always has an event in Cupertino for people that are there at WWDC. He calls it the
Oh,
Talk Show
yeah.
Live
The
because
talk show
his
live,
podcast
right?
is called The Talk Show, and he is often lucky enough to get Apple executives. This year it was Craig Federighi and Joswiak and also John Gianday. I can't pronounce his last name. He's the guy that does AI for Apple. The three of them were up on stage. It's an event that you have to buy tickets for. The tickets always sell out, and you got to be there in
Yeah.
Cupertino. So of course, I have never been there in person. I have watched it on video when they put it on YouTube about a week or so later. This year, for the first time ever, they had this thing that if you downloaded this third-party app called, I think it was called Theater, which is made by
Oh,
Sandwich
really?
Video, who does all sorts of video type things and commercials and stuff like that. Adam Lissagor, I think, who does it. If you downloaded this free app, you could get into an environment where it appeared like you were in a theater. So if I look around me, I saw theater seats and stuff. And right in front of me, I was able to watch the talk show event live as it happened. So it was
Oh,
live
really?
streaming video. But Brett, it wasn't just live streaming video.
Interesting.
It was live streaming 3D video. And so I felt like I had a
Whoa.
front row seat. And you can actually see, and sometimes 3D is like, woo, this is, really in your face. But sometimes 3D is not used for a whiz bang effect. It's just that it adds to the realism of the moment. And when you're seeing people sitting on stage, on a couch or on a chair, asking questions to each other, the 3D was not essential, but having a 3D component, I literally felt like I was sitting in the front row of the audience watching a
Wow.
presentation, and it was completely immersive. It was amazing. And my only regret was that I couldn't share it with somebody else. So somebody I was talking to during it, and it was difficult. I wish
Right.
there was a way that we could have put spatial persona in there so I could turn and I could see him, and he and I could have spoken during the event. But this is the future. That was the first
Matter of
time, I
time.
believe, the
Yeah.
first time that a 3D, that an event has been streamed in 3D, to my knowledge. And I participated in it, and it was amazing. And I can't
Really?
wait to do more of that. And again, it gets back to the Vision Pro. So many times when I use the Vision Pro, I tell myself, this is the future, and I can't wait until the masses have this. It's going to be so incredible. And so again, just to sort of end up some of my favorite announcements for the Vision Pro, again, just the fact that we're seeing the future and Apple's marching towards that future, it's just exciting stuff. So, and that's a good way to sort of sum up the whole overall event, whether it's
That's
the iPhone
right.
that we know and love, or the
Right.
iPad, or the cutting edge technology like Vision Pro. Apple is marching forward, some ways incrementally, some ways with taking major new steps, like with Apple Intelligence. I mean, there's just so much going on. And although maybe Apple's not doing everything the way that I would love them to, and some things are slower than I might like, but gosh, you can't help but be impressed at the quantity and the quality of what they are showing off this week.
It was really impressive this past Monday. And I know I appreciate everybody sticking with us because there was so much to really cover and talk about. And there's so much more. I mean, we've already started to see in some folks, as you've alluded to a couple of times, Jeff, that are using the beta versions of iOS 18. And there's just going to be more and more things that are coming out. So we will talk with you next week. I mean, I feel like next week is just going to be a little bit more of the same, but we're really going to hone in, I think, on some of the things that are either going to be most exciting that we've seen, or things that, they didn't officially formally announce, but people are going to start finding them within those little Easter eggs within iOS 18, and a little bit more detail coming out. So in that case, we'll talk with you next week, Jeff.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.